Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our weekly tropical weather outlook video for this week, March 23rd, 2025. Let's start off with the countdown to hurricane season. This week, we're at 70 days till the start of hurricane season, which is June 1st, at least for the Atlantic Basin. In the Pacific, at least in the Eastern Pacific, that take away around 15, 16 days. I'm pretty sure we're around 54, 55 days out till that hurricane season begins. Bottom line, we're getting very close. Time is flying by very quickly. Now less than 2.5 months away, and in just a week, if not slightly over, in just a week's time, we'll be at 60 days. Of course, since April begins, not this upcoming week, but the next week. And with that, we'll only have 2 months till hurricane season starts. So time is definitely flying by very quickly, and hurricane season, as I'm saying, every single week, hurricane season is fast approaching, even if it doesn't seem like it. But it'll definitely start to become noticeable within the next few weeks, which is why, once again, now is the time to really start paying attention to whatever factors we have for this hurricane season, which is what we're going to do right now by taking a look at the latest NOAA Coral Reef Watch sea surface temperature anomalies, like we do every single week, generally to get an idea of what is going on right now. We're still in March, obviously, but once again, roughly about a week to 10 days away from the start of April. And in terms of the sea surface temperature anomaly set up, not only across the Atlantic, but obviously whatever goes on in the Pacific will really start to become important to what the setup will be for this hurricane season. And as of right now, generally pretty warm across the Atlantic. We have some of these cooler patches off of Eastern Africa or off of the Eastern Atlantic and off the coast of West Africa. But I'm not too concerned. Typically, this is just a sign of the typical stronger trades that we have during the winter and spring months out in the Eastern Atlantic. But by the time we get to hurricane season, especially by the time we get to May and June, usually this area warms up nicely and definitely warms up enough by the time we get to peak season that this really isn't that much of a concern. But what does catch my eye is, especially if you look across the Western Atlantic, and this is significant because usually, especially when we're talking about immediate threats, and especially the early part of the hurricane season, usually in months like June and July, most of the activity doesn't develop out in the Eastern Atlantic, which is why I'm not concerned about how cold or warm it is right now. But most of the development that we typically look at in the early months of the hurricane season occurs in the Western Atlantic, close to home where we are. And notice, especially in the Caribbean and into the Gulf, although the Gulf has definitely cooled slightly, I guess, over the last several days, but especially in the Caribbean, we have quite substantial above normal sea surface temperature anomalies. And obviously, this is very significant because closer to home, where we typically look at development in the early season, is very warm. And that is definitely something to keep in mind as we begin hurricane season, and with just 70 days away, if you can believe it. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Pacific and along the Equatorial Pacific with our ENSO, we still have some of these warmer anomalies in the Eastern Pacific, although that has definitely eroded away quite a bit over the last week, kind of associated with this warming of the ENSO. But definitely, as you could see, we're not warming substantially enough that we are definitely headed towards an El Nino. And that's going to be the biggest question mark over the next several weeks, is how much does this warming occur along the Equatorial Pacific, and will it be enough that eventually it starts to spread westward and become a sort of basin-wide warm thing where we head towards El Nino? Or do we see some warming occur, but it doesn't sustain itself, and we kind of remain in a neutralish pattern, which is what we have right now. We have some warming in the eastern Pacific, but still a little bit colder as you get towards as you go west. Not quite La Nina anymore like we were several weeks ago, but we're still generally coolish around neutral. And I guess you could really look at it when you look at the sea surface temperature anomalies right in the Nino 3.4. How convenient the latest value today is literally right at 0 degrees Celsius, so pretty much right on the neutral mark. We did see a little bit of warming occur last week, especially over the last 2 weeks or so, especially from the eastern Pacific. We saw quite a bit of warming, very sustained westerly winds, which kind of helped warm up and really erode away the La Nina that we had as we went from mid-month February up into so far in the month of March. But that's really collapsed over the last week or two, and we're right now hovering around neutral. And you can even see with the SOI dashboard, especially from late month last month into the early part of March, we saw the SOI dip quite significantly, almost went towards neutral in terms of the 30-day average. But so far, over the last several weeks in the month of March, we kind of seen the SOI rebound a little bit. So based on that information, that would tell me at least that so far in the Pacific, we're not overwhelmingly headed towards an El Nino. We've definitely seen the ENSO warm up quite a bit over the last several weeks, especially really quickly going back to this map in February, especially, well, really most of February. It was not till the very end of last month that we then saw significant warming, and we're now in neutral category. But for most of last month, we were in a La Nina, as you could see by the Nino 3.4, where we've definitely warmed up since then, but we're not warming up so much. It's not like we're straight warming up all the way into El Nino. We're hovering towards ENSO neutral by now, and you can even see once again with the SOI rebounding, we're now at 6 points, almost 7 points in the latest 30-day average of the SOI. And I always mention 7 points above normal with the SOI is usually what correlates to a La Nina. So the atmosphere is definitely not in a hurry to get towards El Nino at all. And even with the 90-day average, you could see over the last several weeks, it's remained steady. So watching the ENSO very closely. Definitely we're not in a La Nina any longer, but right now the theme kind of seems to be hovering around neutral. And the question will really be is, does that continue over the next several weeks as we head into hurricane season? And it's definitely creating quite a bit of uncertainty right now in terms of what the pattern will be as we get into the summer for hurricane season, at least in the ENSO perspective. But obviously, we all got to watch it over the next several weeks, and we'll certainly be doing so, I can assure you. Let's head over, though, to sea surface temperatures, not the anomalies, but the actual sea surface temperatures, what the real values are. And this is the Gulf of Mexico. Definitely starting to warm up. It's definitely cooled down, though, over the last week or so. You could see, and I mean, this really doesn't matter that much right now in terms of how warm the Gulf is. Maybe it does have a factor into severe weather season, and especially a warm Gulf helps, fuel extra moisture for severe weather across the South, and we definitely saw that come into play within the last week when we had our significant severe weather outbreak last weekend, and we're also going to have some severe weather this weekend as well, at least tonight, that we need to talk about, but it's not going to be anything as significant, nowhere near as significant as we saw last week, although I'll get to that in a moment. But in general, in terms of sea surface temperatures in the Gulf, you see 19 degrees Celsius up along the shelf waters. And in general, most of the Gulf in the low to mid 20s. You have the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm kind of poking out north a little bit. Obviously, this is associated with the Gulf Stream. which kind of pokes north and then eventually comes north enough that it eventually breaks off and into the loop current. Or well, the loop current is associated with the Gulf Stream. Eventually, it comes north enough that it breaks off, and we get these big eddies of warmth in the Gulf. And I think I mentioned this in the past, but sometimes when hurricanes travel across these eddies, it can really help them rapidly intensify. Hurricane Katrina went over an eddy. And they're kind of like these bundles of very warm, deep sea surface temperature anomalies with very high upper ocean heat content. Doesn't seem like we have any of those eddies right now, but I'm pretty sure as we get towards the summer, we'll maybe see a few develop. And in general, the Gulf somewhat warm right now, although definitely not nowhere near as warm as we need for tropical development. But usually the Gulf warms up, especially once we get towards May and June, it warms up very quickly. And by the time we get to hurricane season, no matter what year it is, the Gulf is almost always sustainable for major hurricane development. No matter what year it is, at least in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies, that's just how warm the Gulf gets. So not really particularly interested in terms of what we have with the sea surface temperatures right now. But obviously, it's important to look at, especially when we have a storm occurring, just to get an idea of what we're working with in terms of sea surface temperatures. But for right now, general warming in the Gulf right now, generally most of the Gulf around low to mid 20s, and definitely would expect that to warm up quite a bit over the next several weeks as we head towards hurricane season. And then let's kind of open up the map a little bit towards the entire Western Atlantic. And in general, also pretty warm, especially through the Caribbean. And again, with the Gulf, well, with the Caribbean, the case is that usually at almost any point in the year, the Caribbean will always be warm enough for major hurricane or in general tropical development, but even major hurricane development in some cases, as you can see, some 28s in the Caribbean right now. Those are definitely going to become more widespread over the next several weeks as we start to see the Atlantic in general warm. But obviously, even if the Caribbean is right now at least 26 degrees Celsius throughout pretty much the entire length of the Caribbean, and in general, most of the tropics right now across the Western Atlantic, obviously, atmospherically, we're definitely not there in March. Which is why, despite the fact that we have 26 degrees Celsius right now in the Caribbean, we don't really look at development in March because atmospherically we're not there. We have lots of wind shear, and in general, it's also very dry in the atmosphere too. But once again, sea surface temperatures, especially in the Caribbean, will really become important, especially once we get towards June and towards the start of the hurricane season, since usually the Caribbean and Gulf is where we look at typically for development in the early season. But it's generally a good idea to just get an idea of what we have right now. And then along the Gulf Stream, low to mid 20s, and that'll also warm up too, as well as the Gulf, as we get towards the spring, and definitely as we get towards April and May. You see the Gulf kind of on the cooler side right now, once again, mainly in the lower to mid 20s and also along the Gulf Stream too. But watch as we get in towards April and May, I'd say especially May, both areas will warm up very substantially. And by the time we get towards June, the entire Gulf will at least be in most areas 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, and that also happens along the Gulf Stream as well. So generally just something to keep in mind once again as we head toward over the next several weeks. But in terms of what we have right now, as I said earlier, in terms of United States weather right now, we have severe weather to talk about today. Definitely noticeable and definitely something that will have an impact in terms of your day. But in terms of whether or not this will be a significant severe weather outbreak, Definitely not on the caliber of what we had last week. That was pretty significant. We had over 100 confirmed tornadoes throughout the weekend across the South. And this weekend, definitely not seeing that kind of setup take shape, but definitely, at least in terms of severe weather, it obviously is still a nuisance. It obviously still will have an impact on your day. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. We have a slight risk in effect through portions of the southern central U.S. from Texas, Arkansas, up into Mississippi, Louisiana as well, the northern part of Louisiana, and also northwestern Alabama. And we have a marginal risk that surrounds that. The tornado risk, once again, definitely not on the caliber of last week. Only as high as a 5% chance for tornadoes. Last week, I think, was 10, even 15% chance. With the hatched area, we don't have a hatched area this week. So definitely already a sign that we're not going to be anywhere near significant as we were last week. And then obviously we have the wind and hail threats too that you got to keep in mind. Not just the tornado threat, there's also wind and hail, and obviously flooding rain as well from some of these thunderstorms. Definitely something to keep in mind. And then as we head into tomorrow, marginal risk for the Gulf Coast. Tornado risk is there, although it's not significant, only 2% chance. And then we also have a threat from wind and hail. And then as we head towards day 3, no significant severe weather expected anywhere across the U.S. And then let's really quickly take a look at days 4 to 8. Nothing significant in the day to 4-8 range as well. So really only focusing so far on this weekend, as in tonight into tomorrow morning. And let's play it out for you in terms of modeling with the HRRR. Really quickly, let's take it out over the next several hours. Quite a bit of rain, some heavy rain over portions of Tennessee and Ohio, especially, I guess, across the Ohio River Valley, and then up into the Midwest. We have some rain and some snow for portions of Wisconsin, rain for Michigan, and then we have a low pressure associated with this that moves northeast. And then eventually, as we head towards the late night hours, this is 9, 10, and 11 o'clock Eastern time, you start to notice that we get a line to develop over portions of northern Alabama, stretching all the way from Texas, and it extends all the way, once again, into northern Louisiana, portions of northern Alabama and northwestern Alabama and northern Mississippi, and then into central eastern Tennessee. And then obviously it strengthens a little bit, and then continues eastward, eventually moving downstate in Louisiana and Mississippi, and then into Alabama, and then this general system kind of falls apart as we head into early tomorrow morning. Still bringing rain though across portions of Alabama, and then into portions of northwestern Georgia as we head into tomorrow morning. Obviously, this definitely looks like a line that would produce severe weather. But especially if you go to the setup we had last week, this looks nothing like it. So once again, kind of piggybacking off of the idea that we're not looking at anything significant in terms of severe weather. Obviously, it will be there. And it will be also overnight too. So if you at all ever have a tornado warning, that is definitely not fun, dealing with severe weather in the overnight hours, especially a tornado warning. But at least in terms of, whether or not the severe weather will impact your day, likely not, as once again, really it looks like it's going to occur for most people in the overnight hours, especially as we head towards 9, 10, 11 o'clock. And then as we get into midnight once we get into the early morning hours of tomorrow, this kind of setup begins to fall apart. And then we also kind of have some snow for people in portions of upstate New York and into interior New England. So we have that out of the way with severe weather. Let's kind of zoom out and look beyond tonight into tomorrow over the next week with the GFS. We obviously have our system with a 990 low pressure over portions of the Great Lakes. We bring snow to portions of the northern Midwest and into southern Canada. Then that all moves out by late tomorrow into Tuesday. And then in general, as we head towards the week, throughout the week, things are kind of on the quiet side, at least in the eastern half of the United States. We have a high pressure over the southeast, so nothing significant in terms of major weather that occurs. Maybe we might get some action looking, or at least there might be some moisture over portions of the south central and then into the plains. But at least in terms of any significant weather, I guess you would have to focus in on the Pacific Northwest. They get battered throughout the week this week with rain and obviously snow for the higher elevations. And then as we head into the weekend, look at that really significant system that moves into the West Coast. Definitely brings quite a bit of significant rain to portions of central and northern California and then into the Pacific Northwest. And then this is heading into Saturday and into Sunday. Looks like we do get a system that develops over the Midwest and brings rain to quite a bit of people, and then maybe a little bit of winter weather once again to the Great Lakes region. So quite a little quiet in terms of weather throughout most of the week, with things becoming a little bit more unsettled as we head once again into the weekend. But in terms of any major severe weather, not looking at it, not really looking particularly strong or significant in terms of any major severe weather events that might occur this week, which is obviously good. We don't need, any major severe weather right now, especially because a lot of people are still reeling from severe weather that we just had a week ago. So obviously, any quiet right now will definitely be enjoyed. But once again, we're only in March. Severe weather season really doesn't ramp up until we get to next month, and especially into May. And I'm pretty sure we'll probably have more severe weather on the way, especially across portions of the South. I'd imagine within the next few weeks as we head into the height of severe weather season. And then once we get beyond that, we'll start looking a lot more seriously into hurricane season, because by then we'll be into late April and into May. And you definitely know, how the drill goes. That's when the talks of hurricane season really become significant. And by then we'll probably have also as well a better idea of what the setup will be for hurricane season by then, obviously with ENSO, and obviously with whatever happens with our setup in the Atlantic. All things though that we will be watching very closely over the next several weeks. Thanks for watching today's video though. We'll obviously be having updates throughout the week on regular weather, although I'm not sure we will, because once again, it doesn't really look like there will be much happening this week. So if we don't have any videos that I'll post throughout the week, stay tuned for next weekend on Saturday for the next weekly tropical weather outlook. And if you want to stay tuned for that and you're not already, please, I really encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. And obviously, whenever I post my videos, make sure to turn on the notification bell. So once again, whenever I post, you can get the video the second I upload it. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And we will talk again very soon.